I'm Derek Hankerson, and I'm with FirstCoast.tv. This morning, I'm with my cousin B, and we're at Flagler College for the Yamasee Conference. B, good morning. Can you explain to the non-natives what B stands for?
B in our language, which our language is the language of Hichiti. A lot of the Mikosuki people speak a form of it right now, but B means head chief, and me being head chief of the Yamasee Indian Nation.
Is the Yamasee Nation a federally recognized tribe?
Well, that's a twofold question, and sometimes people lack the understanding of federal recognition versus federal acknowledgement. Federal acknowledgement is what we do have, and federal acknowledgement comes from various forms: treaties, federal court orders, and or the process where you petition the Bureau of Indian Affairs to be actually recognized. Now, once you receive or you put forth a treaty and make sure that your tribe is a part of that treaty, and or you prove that you have a federal acknowledgement through court documentation, you can now use that in order to be federally recognized. We have federal acknowledgement through federal court documentation, and it's nothing that we put on record or publicized through online documentation and whatnot like that, but we do have federal acknowledgement through federal court system recognizing us as a legitimate tribe based on the standards of what a tribe is.
How do we distinguish between the Creeks and the Yamasees?
Well, that's a very complicated but simple question, and it was posed yesterday at the conference. What was the distinction? And what we found is that we know historically there was no difference. The Yamasee were renamed the Creeks. The Creeks did not exist until after the Yamasee War of 1715. If you get the book or you find yourself ever wanting to research a book, the invention of the Creek Nation identifies that inside of the documentation. It says that the name Creek was created for a political purpose, which would be basically land acquisition. So I think to try and piece this thing together or the puzzle together for people will create disruption of history. I think it would upset a lot of people because you have a nation now called the Creek Nation that is federally recognized, and people were like, well, why aren't the Yamasee recognized if they are actually the Creeks? And some of that supporting factor was the Yamasee was the only tribal nation here in the southeast that had an upper and lower chiefdom or confederacy. Well, there was no upper or lower Creeks before there was an upper or lower Yamasee. And so, without going into detail, because this is a very controversial topic. Without going into detail, I would just employ the viewers to do their own research and find out for themselves.
And that's why it pays to tell the truth from the beginning. My last question is, why do academics assume all Yamasee have been extinct?
To be fair to the academics, I would not say that all academic scholars think the Yamasee were extinct, because if they did, we wouldn't have a conference today.
Good point.
This conference also outlined and entailed through factual documentation and proof through bloodlines, the continuation of Yamasee Clan members and grandmothers, and everything that they've had and presented here, that we were never extinct. That's the purpose of the first ever Yamasee Conference, which also correlates with the 300-year anniversary of the Yamasee War of 1715. The academic scholars that were centuries old, as we would like to say, let's go back in time, they had a unique purpose. They had a specific purpose to make the Yamasee extinct, because we had a land settlement. We had a land agreement. We had one of the first reservations in the United States. It behooved them to say that these people who have given us problems for over centuries now are dead. They're gone. It gives you right now to land, gives you rights to the land. They needed to do that to disrupt the fabric of the Native American population, and also to encompass the land that they was trying to colonize. So after the Yamasee War, they had to have the Lord Proprietors feel comfortable about their investments, coming from England and sending over their indentured servants to come here and then colonize the land. It's sort of hard to say, I want you to invest in something in this new world, and you're saying, well, we have to worry about the savages. What about those savages, that just killed 400, Charleston people and killed, massacred all of our people. Well, the best way to do that was to write us out. The Europeans have a saying that says, the pen is mightier than the sword.
That's correct.
And in this instant, it was. Our people never had the need or want to write or read their documentation. We never cared about how they seen us. Our whole purpose was for survival.
That's right.
We cared about our children, our grandmothers, the same
families.
thing we are now.
Exactly.
And the whole writing this out was just that. But anyone that takes the time out, without being ignorant,
Right.
you actually take the time out and say, hey, how did these people become extinct when you identifying them as Seminoles?
Right.
Or you identifying them as Mikosuke?
Right.
Or you identifying them as Yamasee Seminoles, or all the different names they give us? How is that an extinct race?
Right.
How do you say these people no longer exist when you say these other tribesmen married into their women and had babies by their women, when every tribe in the Southeast had a matrilineal society?
Right.
So that meant that if you had a baby from a woman and she was of the Yamasee, then that baby was Yamasee.
That's right.
And so they have these things documented on Seminole records.
Right.
They have these things documented amongst the Mikosuke.
Right.
They have it documented amongst the Creeks. So, when you say that, again, the extinction, people that have a purpose will look past that.
Right.
People who have a purpose will say, oh, well, they're all African, or they're African American.
Right.
Well, no, we're not. We happen to be dark-skinned people, and actually, we're not even black. We're
Right.
red-skinned. We're red-skinned. We're
Red-skinned,
Yeah.
exactly.
You know what I mean? They say copper tone.
Exactly. It's Redskins.
It's Redskins.
Right.
That's
And
what we
hence the big debate with the Washington Redskins. Some look at it as being offensive, some look at it as being derogatory, but what most people don't know is prior to the British immigrating to Virginia and Washington, who were there? The Redskins.
The Redskins, and that's exactly right. It is so pivotal that people really understand the literal meaning of things.
Exactly.
And what I mean by that is, when people see dark-skinned Indians, and we're going to see some cousins, the Mikosuke.
Yes.
Today, we're going down to Miami to see Leroy Osceola,
Yes.
the traditional Mikosuke.
Yes.
When you see their ancestors, which are our ancestors,
Yes.
you look at us. You're looking at mirror images of us.
Right.
And so that is important, because when you see modern day Mikosuke who have bred out a little bit,
Right.
or are breeding out
Right.
gradually,
Right.
and
Right.
they become lighter and lighter of skin,
Right.
those with the truth will say, well, this is coming from the raping of our women,
Right.
the raping of our children, and their skin tone gets lighter.
Right.
And I say that because, it becomes so controversial when people see people of our skin tone
Who are lighter or darker.
who are darker.
Exactly.
And then they say, oh, they're Africans. That is like saying all of the lighter versions of Native Americans in the West are Mexicans.
Exactly.
They get called that.
Sure.
They get called that.
It's ignorance.
It is ignorance.
It's sheer ignorance.
It's pure ignorance
Right.
at its best.
Right.
And it's also a form of racism, because it's a competition.
Right.
What is it that you don't want the
Right.
dark-skinned Indians to achieve?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And you're perpetuating the same type of mentality or
Ignorance.
mental ignorance that your ancestors have were part to, that they had subjected themselves through, and what they were fighting about. You're doing the
Exactly.
same thing, and then we won't do, as Native Americans, we won't say, well, brother, you're lighter than myself, and science have proven you're Mongoloid, your ancestry is a Mongoloid, and that you come from Siberia.
Right.
We won't do that. So we don't have to play that game.
That's right.
What we do is we embrace all people, but we ask that you truly get an understanding of Native American history, Native American documentation. There is nothing that we wrote about us.
Right.
Go back to, if you believe in the white man, then go back to his documentation and look at what he says, because it only seems that our people believe what he says.
Right.
So it's documented who we are. It's documented what we've done. It's documented where we were.
Right, that's right.
And when they couldn't no longer document us, they put census records.
That's
on us.
right.
You know what I mean? They started
Right.
putting the census to find out where we
Where
were.
we were.
And
Where
then-
are you?
And then they wrote down Negro.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I asked everybody, where was a Negro on the continent? Name the country Negro.
There is no country. Actually, it was a Spanish term for black.
Plain and simple.
So we were in Spain.
Plain and simple. But you had a question. I apologize.
No, what I was going to say is my cameraman, Jorge Rivera, had two questions. And one question was, would you speak something in Yamasee? Would you say something in Yamasee for non-native speaking people?
Ani miki siko halam hachutolame Yamasee hajo. Ani miki be ayati Yamasee. Ani fusi eripaka hajo. Ska mikosuki. Puni Yamasee onke. Shunabichi. To you, your cameraman, to the people. A rough translation is, I am Siku Hidden Eagle, Yamasee, of the chief Arapaka Hajo. Sam Jones is what he's known, and he lived in Mikosuke,
Yes.
Florida. Our people still exist.
Yes.
And we thank you for allowing us the opportunity to be able to speak and clarify some records.
Truthfully.
Truthfully, thank you.
And the second question that he has is, how do you think DNA testing has brought about, I hate using the word evolution, but I will, brought about the evolution of people actually knowing who they are and where they're from?
Yeah, I'm not there. It hasn't. DNA testing would say that somebody was back in the 1700s and they drew blood from a native, and now they have blood that they can compare it to. That's not true. What they say is DNA testing allows us to know that your ancestors have been on this portion of the continent for so long because of genetic markers, because of the plants that here, the air that you breathe, because of this particular part of the continent's environmental makeup. Okay, so they can trace where your people were versus where they were not. But the problem becomes with that, they've traced markers with everyone that says at one point in time we're all linked into what they call a African woman called Lulu Amalu. Every human being has the same genetic trait and makeup. Every human being can be traced back to one part of this world. And those are markers like the tree, our brothers and sisters, the trees. When you go inside of a tree, they have rings. And the rings can tell you how long that tree has lived and what it has endured. They can literally tell you if that tree encompassed a storm and what damage it did to it.
Right.
You know, they can tell you if smokestacks was around it and it had, you know, the carbon within the tree, you know, absorbed so much smokestack. So they can say, oh, at this particular time, this tree was around a fire. They're doing that now with DNA. And what they found within DNA is there is no genetic marker or makeup that says that you're Indian. There is no genetic marker that says you're Native American. All they can say is your people have been here for so long, and that you have people that were here because of their genetic marker or their genetic makeup.
That makes sense. Well, thank you, cousin.
Thank you. Should I be a chick?